Okay. Hey, everybody. Are we coming in nice and clear? All right. So we'll go ahead and make sure I'm recording. Yeah, I am. So we're really excited to have Sara Armstrong and Daisie Hoitsma here at the University of Montevallo. They currently have their exhibition up in the new art center here, Center for the Arts at Poole Gallery. So, of course, this artist talk and lecture is in conjunction with the show. But if you haven't been out there to check it out yet, definitely see their show. And then, tell your friends about it too, because it's going to be open out. It's going to be open through the duration of April. So stop by Poole Hall, check out the new space, and check out the show. And a little bit about Daisie. Daisie holds an MFA in painting and drawing from Ohio University and a BFA from the University of Texas at Tyler. And then her work has been included in exhibitions at Manifest Gallery, the Attleboro Arts Museum, and the Visual Arts Center in Huntington, West Virginia, among others. And she has taught classes here at here at University of Montevallo, at Ohio University, and then 2 at the University of Alabama. I'm gonna let a few more people in really quick. All right. And then Sara Armstrong has exhibited nationally and internationally since the 1970s. And she has had solo exhibitions at John Gibson Gallery, the Bronx Museum of the Arts in New York, and the Birmingham Museum of Art, and then among many others, of course. So Armstrong now lives and works in Birmingham, where she co-founded the Cooperative Art Gallery Ground Floor Contemporary.
Well, thanks for having us. We're excited to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen then, if that's okay.
Great.
And I just wanted to kind of walk through some of these older pieces just to kind of give a context for my work and for our show and kind of where everything started happening. So this is a piece called No Ground. It's a drawing on panel with graphite and oil. And this is from a few years back. I just moved to Nebraska after growing up in Texas. And so suddenly living in Nebraska, it was this new experience of being in snow all the time, and so this drawing was just kind of a reflection on that experience, that feeling of kind of floating where the ground starts to meet the sky. And to me, it was just a really powerful experience. I had this area that I walked every day to work. And so it's just really special. So that drawing for me was kind of a reflection on that experience. So in addition to land and kind of the environment, I'm also really interested in behaviors and kind of actions from my daily routine. So this was a solo exhibition called Pear Traces, and it was made, I guess, about a year and a half after my first son was born. And so that whole first year of us just being constant companions and me kind of seeing my behaviors reflected in his, and then I start reflecting his back, kind of mimicking them back and forth. So like the drawing on the back wall was called Hard Rock, and it was from the action of my body rocking him to sleep, but then also kind of like the desire for sleep for myself. So the craving of the kind of the closed eyelids and that void, that blackness, but kind of really welcoming it. And so all those other pieces kind of have different similar, actions I was referencing to. The black and white one there in the middle was called Back Toss Touch. And so there was a period where as a little baby, he was taking all of his toys and throwing them over his shoulder, and then he would turn around and be really surprised, kind of as if he didn't know where they were going to end up, that it was just this total shock to him. So I approached my painting in a similar way, where I had my back to the panel, and I worked backwards, so I couldn't see what I was doing. So I would turn around, kind of respond to the marks, then turn back around and keep going, kind of mimicking his actions. But so you'll see all of these are drawings on raw panel, just wooden panels. And for me, I really love working on wood. To me, it's just such a satisfying experience. And a lot of it kind of refers back to that childhood craving of drawing on walls or tables. It's just a really different experience, I think, kind of to hear the sound and kind of to echo it back. And it really allows for a lot of more kind of aggressive gestures and kind of a physicality to me. But I do also work on paper. So this is an image of a drawing on paper called Inland. And so it's ink on Yupo paper. And the Yupo paper is really water resistant. So it has this really kind of beautiful reaction with water-based media where it just sits on top and kind of floats. And so here I was kind of thinking again about the meeting of water with the land. So kind of the strata of the land where you see the marks in between and the layering, but then also kind of the dripping and then just that kind of hard butting up of these two different things. So those are kind of a few of my older pieces, and then we'll let Sara talk a little bit about hers.
So it's fun to be looking back at work, and a little different from Daisie. This drawing is from 1978, and it was from working on the sound for the drawings for a show that I had at the last time I showed in Montevallo was 1979. But before I go on, I want to say, Daisie, thank you so much, and to Montevallo for thanks so much, because it is so great to be showing there again. And particularly it's so great being in this wonderful new space at the Poole Gallery and the new art center. But Daisie and I spent a good bit of time talking about what's drawing about and what's drawing about for us. And, you know, she was just talking about with some of the pieces she was, and we continue to have a lot of overlaps and a lot of drawing being many different things or many directions. And with this drawing, it was really exploring how I was going to deal with sound. And this drawing is a finished drawing. We're going to see some that are much more study drawing. But Daisie, let's turn to the piece. We might come back to this drawing. But this was the installation at Montevallo. And it was my first time to do sound. I had, when it was shown before, I had shown it with someone else I collaborated with, and he did the sound. And, you know, which was probably impossible for I spent a year building this piece, and to add something that is just sort of outside, I don't know, I don't think I could have liked what anybody did. And so I ended up, since I didn't, I wanted to figure out what was sound about for me. I'm definitely not a musician. I don't have a very good ear. So sound, my dealing with sound, or my desire to have sound in this piece, because it has speakers in all of these pieces, or a number of them. I had to understand, I use sound a little bit like a paint or color. I ended up studying with how sound moved through it. Daisie, let's go to the next one, and then we'll come back to it. Yeah. Here was a score that I ended up on the left-hand side, and just a few of the sort of study drawings on the right-hand side. So here's drawing is really trying to explore. But I think what Daisie is talking about, she's exploring. So we really do overlap in many of these ways. I was trying to figure out what was the relationship of the color in these pieces to what sound was. I was trying to understand the relationship of how the forms themselves, the sort of momentum of the curve, and there are two types of forms. So, and how do they relate to the structure? How previous installation, the pieces had been so you just wandered around them. This is much more Stonehenge the way of looking at it. I had been in England. I had been there, and I had seen Stonehenge by then. And it was, for me, the color and the form, and that sort of to enclose you in a sound was what I was thinking about. And so I'm really taking those shapes and trying to structure the way the sound is going to come in. I ended up recording with a group a number of acoustical sounds by the inside of the piano, and how that would do. And then I took all of these different sounds in the glass, and I ended up deciding when they would come in, and those shapes are, there are 3 tape loops, and those shapes are related to when at the point in time is a 12-minute tape loop. So I was not composing as much as I was structuring sound, I think. And that just seemed like because I'm just now, after all these years, getting ready to take this piece of sculpture. I have the option to take it to a exhibition in Fort Lauderdale. It seemed, since it was first shown in Montevallo, it just seems like it was great to go all those years back and be able to sort of talk about a little bit about what I was doing. This is also just something, I was amazed to get to realize how many things, notes that I have. And with your work, I think, with as artists, it really is interesting to keep as much documentation as you can. Daisie, go back to that first drawing for one moment. So as I'm trying to understand what on earth I was doing that many years ago, I actually pulled this drawing out, and it had for me where the tapes were, and I sort of followed that, and then I found some others that sort of told it a different way. So I've sort of made it resemble some of that, but I really did use some of this information that was recorded. And you can see I'm talking about the movement and the sort of the height and the way the curve moves. So I think that would be about it with that. I think we can move on to our installation.
All right, so here's images from our show that's up right now, From Within. And this is my piece here on that first wall or the back wall when you walk in. And it's one piece, and it's called The Womb Expands as the Sun. And I was pregnant again this last year. We have a new baby. And so the piece on the right there for me, it's a very figurative piece, and not that I expect everyone to read it that way, but to me, it's a very figurative piece. Kind of looking down and seeing, your belly is this shape and it kind of grows, but to me, it also kind of references like a horizon line, and you're kind of marking time by the sun coming up or going down. And to me, it's a very similar kind of thing, this kind of marking of time and watching the growth. I'm also really interested in weight. Kind of a physical weight, but also a psychological weight. So for me, kind of that part on the left, and you'll see there's a detail here on the right image with there's a lot of scraping and removing and kind of pulling back through the layers. But for me, it's just kind of this simultaneously like a fresh kind of the rising of something, the expansion of something, but also kind of the more of a psychological weight, I guess is just what I would say. And then so here's my work on the other wall. And there's some of the titles, Breath Migration there on the left. And then the 3 little pieces there on the right. And so here's kind of a similar, for me, very psychological thing, like this last year, I think, for globally has been so unusual, but I was thinking a lot about breath, and in kind of this year, due to everything, it became such a negative thing, like the sharing of breath, the sharing of air, and how we were supposed to keep it all segmented and separate, but also kind of in a beautiful way, I guess how your breath does move and translate and transform, and kind of just a sharing of it. So kind of dealing with the both sides of it, I was just really thinking a lot about it. For me, for years, the idea of breath has been really comforting. I love thinking about the breath and the in and out, and how, it's just happens whether or not I'm thinking of it. So to me, it's always been a really comforting thing. But, kind of acknowledging that it can be kind of this dangerous thing too, in a way, I guess, the sharing of it. And there's Sara's.
All right. We should, Daisie, do you want to read what the statement was that we wrote up or you wrote up?
Actually, I don't have it right in front of me, but just talking about drawing as a marker of psychological and physical shifts, mainly.
Yeah, it was, I'm sorry, I didn't bring it here either. So this series of drawings I've been doing, I guess let's start with they all are in the sort of time mapping series. And I really do feel like it's dealing with time in the sense that I am pouring and staining on paper. And it really is coming from paper making. And when you pour pigmented fiber or you really don't know exactly what's going to happen. You have to sort of wait with it changing with the drying. But I'm doing a lot of manipulating with that as it's being done. And it's more, it has a lot to do with chance. There is control. It's not, you are sort of work with what happens. And I'm also working with both sides of the paper with this. And so sometimes they end up, completely not any good. Other times they end up where they actually have two sides that are sort of interesting to deal with. A lot of I have a history of being my MFA is in painting, but I was never able to stay flat. And so with this, it was fun to make these drawings become more sculptural, and instead of keeping them flat, so that you use the backside, you're using all parts of it. And for me, a lot of times I feel like the work I do is like drawing in space. And this is a little bit more of a solid in a sense, or a sheet, that you're not drawing the linear lines in space, but you are drawing a line in space. And so I had been doing these pieces, like on the left-hand side, you'll see that they're sort of individual pieces, but with doing this one on the sculptural part, it seemed tremendously necessary to not let these be individual pieces, that they were much more of a part, so that they overlapped, so that you read them as one piece, even though I did still label them because those were the numbers that were on the drawings. So again, what I'm dealing with is that sort of flow, change, not knowing what I'm doing, knowing what I'm doing, and also being ready to see something else different, and dealing with color and how the color changes as you move with it. And here you can see we have a detail so that you can see a little bit closer. The detail is the one on the right-hand side. I mean, that is from that piece, you can see that. And so I think with looking at the show, I think both Daisie and I, we really like that sort of marks and layers and manipulation. I am dealing with mine with wet on wet and drying, and not mark making with this work. And while Daisie is really dealing with mark making on hers. So I think we have had a good time talking about drawing and what it is and how it expands and how we use it with doing a show like this. Yeah, and this is just another view. So I would hope that if somebody is in the gallery, they might even, with the corner piece, they might even go in and under it and look at it from the other side too. And I have to thank Tanner. Tanner and Daisie were both tremendous with helping to hang this. Since I haven't done this before, it was great to have figuring out how we could hang this and have it take up the corner and deal with the corner and deal with the space in that corner. Daisie, you want, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so there's just, another kind of install shot of them together. I think that really our kind of arrangement there speaks a lot to each other, this kind of overlapping and butting up against each other of the pieces, and kind of having separate physical objects, but them reading as one piece.
And it was also when we came in to install, it was like, oh my goodness, I do not usually do quite as bright a colors as I'm doing here. And it was really interesting how we slowly moved around and dealt with it and understood how we were going to have the relationships. We were talking about that install is such a critical point, and many times a piece of work can be made or lost in the install. You know, it could look great in the studio, but then how it's placed, where it's placed, what the light does. And oh, this is also interesting. Tana figured out, how do you see in the drawing where we are doing the 4 pieces and the scallops? Oh, well, all of them have scallops, but it was like trying to figure out eventually how to get rid of the lighting scallop and understanding how to do that. You know, so I just want to say that just always plan to have time with installing, because it's such a time that you can look and see and understand more things about your work.
Well, and you brought many more drawings than what you ended up displaying. I think there on the top left, you can see you had a large portfolio just full of drawings. And so it was only once we were in the space and we were together and that you really chose which ones.
Yeah, because we were looking back at forwards at what was going to be up, and how, and sort of we actually changed how walls some and did back and forwards to figure it out. And then you sort of then really looking at what you have.
Yeah, so I think, so we both brought, I guess, more work than what we ended up hanging. But I think that worked really, that was kind of our plan going into it, because we both were really familiar with what we were working on, these current drawings. But, you know, until you kind of see them together, we weren't, you know, sure how we wanted to play it off of each other. But I think that kind of leads into this one. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Oh, okay. I'm doing a show in Fort Lauderdale at a place called Fat Village. And it is what it's doing. It's part of this series of threads and layers that I've done 2 other shows. But this for me is the largest space I've ever worked on. It's 8,000 square feet. And so you can see the sort of circle. That is the piece, the sound piece that I did in Montevallo in '79. So it's going to be shown again for the first time down there. And it's not, you know, it's part of a lot of more pieces that are going to be down there. And it's quite a challenge, and it's also extremely exciting to get to have this opportunity to have pieces, you know, a piece of work that was shown in 1979, shown today with work that I'm just doing. And there are 2 pieces in there that are going to have projections. I've never really done projections before. I've worked with people this time to do that. But the space really required some dynamics. It's a warehouse space. The beams across, that's 19 feet. It's like 23 feet high. And so being such a huge space, it could take a lot of work, but it also, you have to think about how you're dealing. I'm not hanging on any of the walls. Flat work is, I have a huge amount of flat work, but because the walls of this warehouse space, you know, you want the dynamics in the space. And so you don't want to be, you know, it's not going to take, there's cinder block walls, you can't hang on. So that has also been a real challenge to think about how, and the light. Paul Barrett is the curator that's been working with this, and he was extremely good talking about the theatrics of what we were doing down here, and about knowing that I needed to do with a lot of light. And a lot of my work does deal with sound and light. And so that has been an interesting thing. Do you think that video would work?
Well, let me try. And you tell me if it comes up.
Okay.
Do you see it?
Not yet. So it started. I think we only see the screen.
Okay, let me.
We won't do it if it. Okay.
Yeah, you might just, there it is.
Is that it?
Yeah, why don't you start again? One
Okay.
more time.
Make it full screen too.
Show like this, where you are looking back at a show like this, where you are looking back at history of your work, and then putting these together, it also makes you feel, you have to get used to being lost. It's a nerve-wracking thing, but it is the most positive. This space being so huge is giving me the chance to do different periods and also doing new work at the same time, to hear how early sound piece sounds with a piece that is just happening today. It's pushing my boundaries, pushing me in that uncomfortable zone, which is one of the great things that we all get to experience as artists. I want to invite you to visit the exhibition, explore the threads and layers that run throughout 4 decades of my work.
Okay.
Let's see.
That was good, Daisy.
Okay. Am I
Yeah,
still
and-
sharing, or what can you see?
As we can see you.
Okay, cool.
You know what? Why don't we could just go on to that last, one of the topic that we said at the end about community.
Yeah, that was all of the images that we had really to show, but we wanted to kind of talk a little bit about community. I think it's both really important for both of us. But Sarah, you want to start us out?
Oh, okay. So we really said community network support. And, I don't think we can emphasize enough how important community is. It's important in many walks of life and with all of us. And, you think the studio can be a fairly lonely place, and that you really need to think about you need the community, you need the energy or the reactions, or how you, if you have somebody into the studio or you send somebody an image of something, once you put it out in a public sort of thing with anything, you also look at it differently. So it has community, and it just has a lot of layers of reasons to know that we need to do part of it. I think we're going to go back and forth just talking on this one, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think I was just gonna, how we met, you and I met, was at ground floor. So, we had just moved down here from Ohio. And so we were, just going to all the different shows in Birmingham and around the state and stuff. So we ended up at your gallery, ground floor, and that's how you and I met. But I think just you are such an amazing facilitator and host and generous artist, in your inclusion of people. And so ground floor gallery is on the bottom of your building, right? And the 21st Street Studios is on the top. So you have all these artists in your building all the time. And you're just really welcoming to everybody. And so I guess you kind of inviting everybody to be a part of that community was huge for me to get to know people, to a new area. And I guess just kind of an acknowledgement that, we're moving locations, you move to different states, you move to different things. And it's hard for everybody, that kind of first part, that transition, I think. So just, I kind of want to say, like, as a student, when you leave and go somewhere else, or you go to grad school, or then you move somewhere else, where everybody's kind of doing the same things, more or less, or we have done them. And so those transitions can be tricky, and that's fine. Like, it's okay. But just to kind of plug in, like, reach out, introduce yourself to people that you don't know. And it'll be good. It's a good thing.
And, it's not the easiest thing to do. And so I lived for a very long time in New York. And one of the things that, and sort of, we all do workshops, we all do things. And it's like, I got this grant to get this really great workshop. And we did a art opening, and how if somebody's standing over there, you go and introduce yourself. You don't leave, you don't just talk in your cluster. If you can't speak to somebody, just speak to the person that's giving the drinks out, or the waters, or whatever. And it just make yourself, which is not the easiest. I probably have an easier time at ground floor because I feel like it's a responsibility, and I'm not as good at some other openings as, so we all have to work on it. But, you know, the one thing you want to do is sort of bring, you know, somebody's alone and they're looking at something, just go up and try, you know, we try to speak, try to say something, ask what they think about something. And it's not being forward, it's just bringing people into the community, because everybody gets nervous. It's just part of it. And it's in the end, the more inclusive we can be in many ways, and actually get to understand people with other thoughts of views about things, or and we'll just talk art here, but it goes in every direction, is, you know, somebody that works extremely opposite than you do, but the value that you can of trying to listen and understand what they're doing and how they're doing it and what they're thinking about is, you know, it's a growth for you. And it's definitely helpful to the other person to be heard. And we all like to be heard. So.
That's great.
And let's open it up for questions. We're very interested in questions and dialogue. So anyone that's got a question. And I need to go speaker view, gallery view. And I can start off too with the first question. You talked about collaborating, and you mentioned Carrie Fountain earlier, kind of working with sound or maybe with projections. It's exciting because he's our next artist that's going to be speaking in a couple weeks. But can you talk about collaborating with people too? Because you're talking about pushing comfort zones, but I'm interested in like in that experience for you.
Okay, I do work with a lot of different people, and I'm not so sure that some of the things I'm doing are as collaborating, because I have a certain view for that. I think when you get ready to collaborate, you need to be open to make it go in a direction that you don't know about, or that working with Carrie, I'm pushing what I can do, and I'm pushing the way I'm my comfort zone, but I'm still on a track about what I'm trying to, Carrie did the video, and what I'm trying to communicate. And I think that Carrie and I need someday to be so that I am really lost and to see what can happen, and he's really lost. Again, I just make the comment too, is I think it's really important as an artist to be vulnerable and to be lost and to be able to be, you learn a lot faster when you are trying to solve something and you're out of a comfort zone. So it's just, you know, that's part of it. And, but the collaboration is a great thing. So, you know, I had a couple more things talking about the networking that I think is sort of important things to think about. We really do live in a much more global world now. And I think as an artist, well, first of all, artists that are, when you're in school, you have a real structure. And but the moment you're out of school, your structure is really changed. So you have to then invest in trying to figure out how you have people that you connect with, how you have people that sort of help to push you, ask you questions. You know, the professor is not there any longer. And it's really a great thing to develop that as a student, so that you already are sort of adapting to how you will also get when you're out. The next part of that is that when I was saying globally, I think it's important to compare yourself with artists everywhere. It's important to get out of where you are, you know, don't just look at the students that are at Montevallo or in Alabama or the Southeast. You know, we have a big world out here. And so it's important to travel. It's important to feel uncomfortable traveling sometimes. It's important to enjoy it. and just be in different places, you know, Instagram, everything. And I think some of you are probably doing a great job with that, of really seeing people more, a lot more than when I was young. And so I think it's an asset, but just, I think it's important to know that's part of your training, part of your school, that you are just out there. Daisy.
Yes. What else?
Yeah, I know some
Okay.
other folks can have questions too. Don't be shy.
Yeah, I can also talk about a little bit about ground floor and 21st Street Studios. So I got this building where I am, you know, way back in 1979, and with someone, and then I moved and was away. And so the one thing I did not want to lose this building. I love this from the moment I got it here. And I got it because I was kicked out of a lot of other studios. I'd fix them up, and I would, you know, you had to leave. So I thought, I'm not going to get kicked out again. So that's when I did this. But when I decided to move to New York very soon after getting it, you know, so it was great. The one thing I didn't want to leave was the studio. So I knew that artists, I understood how to make studios for people. And so it was first, so a number of people came, the artists really took care of the place. You know, I was able to be an absentee landlord. Space 111 was founded here, and Bare Hands was here. So it has been a lot of different things. And eventually, ground floor, we never were on the ground. There's not really a visible art on the ground floor. So eventually, some people on the third floor, particularly one woman said, I can't walk these stairs anymore, and that we've just got to do something. And so we ended up starting Ground Floor Contemporary. And it is very much more of it's more of a collective. There's studios down there, they're members, and we mainly show the artist, and we do have some shows that are outside, but it's a support team. It's a support and a chance to do work that's not necessarily about selling. It's about pushing yourself and about growth. And so it's a positive place. And so we hope that you all, you know, come to some things at Ground Floor.
How are you getting your work to Fort Lauderdale? You have an 18-wheeler or a big moving truck, or how are you shipping it there?
I'm not driving, but it is Doug McGraw, who is from here. It's his space down there, and he and his partner are driving it, a 20-foot truck. And so it's also interesting this time for me, because it's a 12-hour, you know, drive, that I have to pack it a lot better than I have before. And so, you know, you're building the boxes and, you know, reinforcing them so that they have the 1/2-inch foam car. You've got to pack, and so that things can't move and get scratched and hurt. So it's been a big project.
Sometimes I find with my work, it takes more time to make the crate and to ship it than it did to make the piece, you know, because the work, sometimes things just happen and like, wow, you got a small piece to get into a show, but then it's like, how do you ship this fragile thing across the country? Or it's always really fascinating to me.
Yeah. And yours are really heavy.
Yeah, sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. Yeah.
But a lot of times they are heavy.
A lot of times they are. That's true.
At least a lot of this is not heavy, but still, you know, it's still the packing.
Yeah.
It's a big project. It's another project. Yeah. And the other thing which has been so much for this is because it's pieces that have been a whole show or something. I have electronics and LEDs, and then I have sound, and how all of this sort of jump in your head from one sort of thought process to another, and how you're going to do it, and how are they going to get hung from the beams, and how crossing the beams. So all those processes, I'm actually making folders for each of these pieces that are really big and time consuming, you know, so that I can try to shift my brain a little faster than I would normally do. Are there any questions? Okay, well, let's see if there's any.
Oh, for Sara, I have a question. I noticed in one of your paintings that's hanging on the wall in the gallery, you had listed as one of your materials stain. And I was wondering what kind of stain, what is that? I didn't know if you were referring to the process of staining it, or like what I think of when I think of stain is more like wood stain or something like that.
Daisy or Sara?
Oh, for Sara.
Oh, okay, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It is, so I work with a lot of paper fiber, and actually abaca, which is a banana leaf plant. And so in that, I'm using the pigment that you put in water. And it's very strong because it also is coloring all the fiber. So with those drawings there, I'm not using as much of the fiber. There are some that have fiber on the back, which meant it raised a little bit, but it is staining. It's not, it's acrylic staining, and I'm using water and methylcellulose, which is a sort of something that you use in paper making to sort of hold it together. But part of when I was doing it, I was finding how when I put less water and a little bit more of this, it made some other shapes. So you're constantly trying to see what's going to read from under and what's going to be on the top, and then blotting it and putting more water and then putting the other. So that's the reason I do say staining, because it is staining to me, but not wood stain.
That explains it, because it's such a unique look, and when you look at the picture up close, you really see the texture, and I was really interested in that surface.
Yeah, and I was saying about that, you don't really know what it's going to do. You can manipulate it, but then you wait, when it dries, then you know what you got something. Yeah. And so you keep building on, and then when you wet it again, you lose some of that and you get something else. So it has, the control is not so big.
Yeah.
I really like this talk about a stain too, like kind of noticing sort of like it's rusty tailpipe, but not too rusty tailpipe. I know that sounds weird, but I'm thinking about like Rauschenberg's work, or like a coffee stain, or on a piece of paper, or like how bodily it is, and kind of immediate. Like I think y'all's work is interesting because it's not necessarily image based, but there's like a physicality to it. Like there's kind of a presence to it, and then you hop back and forth between like sculpture and like a kind of 2D work. And I know Daisy's work is Daisy talked about a physicality with like scratching and stuff, but I guess my question is, I'm sorry, I'm making a statement, but can y'all unpack the idea of like of the stain? And Daisy, you use alcohol to resist, don't you? And then sometimes you put your pieces flat and you put rocks on top of them from the driveway. It's a funky process to watch, especially when you're working on paintings in the kitchen. But can you kind of talk about that kind of, kind of non-objective compositions? Can you talk about those? Maybe Daisy and Sara, whoever wants to answer that. Or
Daisy, you start out. Then.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so to me, that's why I call all my work drawings, because to me, the word is just really, it's the broadest term that I feel like I can fit under. And that makes me feel good. I feel like early on, as a student, there's some questions like, well, are you a printmaker or painter? And I was kind of worried. I was like, I don't know what I am. I just wanted to do all those things. So I would try everything, and I loved everything. But I felt kind of nervous, I guess, about, well, where do I fit? So I guess drawing is the biggest umbrella, because to me, I feel like it refers to the action rather than the material. So if I'm at the beach and I make a drawing in the sand, we could all agree, yeah, you made a drawing in the sand, Or if the mirror gets steamed up after the shower and I make a drawing on there, it's a drawing. And so to me, that's how I approach it. So I might use paint in my work. I might use different things. But to me, it's all about the action. and whether or not it's preserved, maybe, you know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but that's what I'm interested in, is that kind of physical action. So a lot of my work is subtractive. I use a lot of razor blades to scrape and remove, and a lot of that kind of references printmaking. I love printmaking, but I realized I was always kind of more interested in the plate than in the print. So having these really large, giant wood panels to work from allows me to kind of explore that surface and the depth. And so a lot of times I'll have kind of relatively large chunks missing, or, you know, you kind of start seeing things, or as the wood might kind of chip away and it reveals a new color that you didn't even know was there, you know, kind of depending on how the plywood might have been laminated or something. But so to me, all the work is very physical, and I'm interested from that kind of bodily gut reaction. And so I kind of mentioned that I'm mainly usually referring to like land or environment that I'm in, or kind of actions or routines from a daily behavior. So kind of those are the two main kind of areas that I float back and forth between. So I use a lot of rocks. I use a lot of objects to make a resist from something. So I might work flat and kind of pour something and then space objects on there, and they'll leave a pattern, they'll leave a trace. Not so much recognizable, but maybe sometimes. And so I like that. I like kind of putting these things that are around me and kind of seeing what is left, but then also seeing what is left from my action. So how I approach something, and then, you know, you think you kind of know like the art or the arc of your arm or the arc of your reach, but seeing it is kind of a little bit different for me. The remains of that.
Mhm.
Sarah?
Yeah. So with the work that's in the gallery, they are very physical, with pouring in the arc of your arm, the same sort of arc thing of pouring and shifting and moving, and again pouring in the water or scrooshing the water or changing it. So, and of making marks. Another comment is that we were talking, what you were saying about how you fit in. It was always, because I date back a little bit further, but it was like, you know, when I finished graduate school, you know, you were a painter. That's what you were supposed to be, and you did paintings. And so thank heavens we're not there anymore. We have a bigger range, and that we can do all these, you know, multimedia and whatever, we can pull it all in. But Daisie and I both agree that drawing is a big umbrella, because it can be in space too. It's not, it can, even though it's a little harder for people to say in space. And when I do something on canvas, I say it's a painting. It's the same process, but, you know, but just because it's on canvas, that means it's a painting. Nothing, you know, whatever. So it's an interesting how we label things, and how where we can push the boundaries. And I think we all are interested in pushing those boundaries of what we can do. There's also this thing about materials. Oh, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, did you have a question, Kimberly? Or sorry, not trying to put you on the spot.
I did have a question, but I wanted to hear Sara talk about materials, because my question involved materials as well.
Okay, so I'll just say one thing, and then because you were, Tana was talking about the staining and all of that, and I've used rust in things, and rust with, you know, in bookmaking and paper making, you know, just because the fiber and how it stains out. And I think any of these things that we can do, materials are just such a great search to try to do something different with them. And I will say that sometime when I keep searching and I'm doing something, and then I realize, oh, you've done something like this before in a little way. You've just twisted it a little, pushed it a little bit.
So I did have a question, sort of. Y'all are talking about like the physicality of your work. both Daisie and you, Sara, and how you interact with it. And especially working with paper and Abaca specifically, we all have this like haptic memory built inside of us of paper, of our experiences with it, and our, most of the time it involves touching it and writing on it and flipping through it, licking it, flipping a page. And, Sara, you're activating the way, like, just looking at the installation behind you, you're controlling movement, you are activating sound and stimulating even more sights with colors and LEDs. And we're taught to not touch the work in the gallery, but when physicality is such an important part of the making and the resulting image, do either of you ever consider bringing that tactile, that tactility to your viewer by allowing interaction through touch and feel and smell even?
So I'll start, and then Daisie, you take it. You're talking about the touch. I am hoping that people do not touch the piece behind me. It is all canvas. I actually move it with gloves on. And so it's easy to get damaged, but, I know that, I would want to touch it. And I'm easier with the painting, with that surface. This surface, because it is so minimal and there's a gradation with the colors, just the repair of it is complicated. So, and it's old, but I agree completely about that touch. And the paper, somehow the paper is a little stronger than the minimalness. You can, it's not as, well, the Abaca can be, I can see that's probably, is that Abaca right behind you that's hanging, right?
Yeah, this is all Abaca.
Yeah, so it's very thin and transparent. I have a number of pieces that are thicker, and so you feel safer with it, not to right, but it is a sense we need to be thinking about, and I agree with working on it, but it's parts, it's a double-edged sword. It's just, to do.
Because like if touch would change it, right? It would create an evolution through the piece. Time would become a factor.
Right. Yeah. It's a hard one. Daisie, what about you?
My work, there's a little, like, in a way I am very flexible and open, like in the making of it. My children touch it and I'm fine with that. Like, I remember talking with other people and they're like, oh, aren't you worried about it? Because, I'm like, no, like that's part of it for me, is that we're kind of collaborating. We're in the studio. It's a accurate, kind of reflection of my life and what I'm trying to talk about. So to me, that I am kind of open in this kind of what will happen, but I think for me, when I'm interacting with works, there is a time component, like you mentioned, of kind of like moving across it, moving from one side or the other, or that forward and backward. And to me, it's a lot like maybe dancing with a partner or something, or even not with a partner, but you're in the space together. You don't have to be touching, but yet there's an awareness, there's a sense of it, and you're responding to it. So even without that actual touch, I feel like we are impacted by all the things around us or all the people around us. And there's a huge awareness just kind of throughout your whole body of it, kind of, even if you don't hear it, maybe you're listening to the music, you don't hear them, but you're aware of their body. So to me, the work is like that. I'm very aware of it. And that's how I kind of read other people's work first. So rather than kind of image based, or, sometimes people talk about paintings as a window into another world or something. So I'm very much in this world, and kind of that clashing of the body of the work with my own body. So to me, it's just very much kind of like a dance kind of reaction.
But when it's in the gallery, do you want anyone to touch it?
I mean, they could. I don't think I would advertise that because I think that probably not end up the way they might think it would. But I don't know. I mean, it's not advertised. To me, it's not important that they would need to actually physically touch it. But I feel like the work is usually hardy enough that, I mean, they could. So yeah, it's not delicate usually. Yeah.
And, you know, I had a comment too. I was thinking about when we were installing the work in the gallery, and Sara kind of mentioned it, and maybe it kind of relates to touch, but we're talking about the physicality of things, right? And the idea of the body, or talking about like reach and like your physicality, but the work kind of talking about your being, thinking about reach, your height. But there was something like that was so rewarding. Like I feel like we were all tuning into the same radio station, or maybe channeling, but I mean, when you had all your you had a lot of work on the floor and you're trying to figure out what you wanted, but you had the piece, it's about 17, 18 feet long, where you layered pieces on top of each other. But you remember working on that composition, and we were kind of responding to the environment. It's sort of like we were a band, you know, like there's like the live music, even though I'm terrible at music. I was terrible playing a recorder in high school, so you don't want to hear me play an instrument. But there's something akin to that. And then you said the work isn't finished until it's installed. I thought that was like really good. And that was a good Sara quote that I'll tell people now. But there was something about in the moment in the gallery. I don't know if y'all want to comment, but I thought that was kind of beautiful. You know, it's and satisfying. It's like when you have a big chocolate brownie that you eat, that you see the brownie and it looks heavy and you feel good. It's sort of like nourishment like that. But I have a weird way of talking about things in terms of food. Sorry, but
No, we are very food people.
But that was really fun. I want to keep doing things like that. Right? Yeah.
But it was the drawings were all sort of layered on top, and all of a sudden it looked good, and it was like, oh, well, maybe we better try this on the wall, you know, particularly with what. And I knew that from that corner to blah 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 was not going to look good, so. It was Sara. It was sort of just happened with the install.
Yeah. And in some spaces you can do that, like Lauderdale, that huge space. How many square feet is that?
8,000.
I mean, that space, you really got to have it dialed in. But the thing about Poole Gallery that's so nice is that it's not super small and it's not large. It's kind of an in-between. So it's kind of more of an intimate space where you can kind of make these compositions that kind of envelop you. Like the architecture isn't overwhelming in this space. So it's it's interesting the parameters that you have to work within when you're setting up work. So.
Well, I know that there will be some changes down there, but I better have a plan before to make any change. Yeah. And I will not know how the sound will be physical, particularly this piece. When you go inside of it, it's very physical. And it felt, when I first heard it last week for the first time all together, it was like they were bodies that, you know, that sort of were in there with these sounds coming out of them. Well, this has been nice.
This is great. And does anybody else have a question or comment or something you want to?
I have a comment. I think it's the colors are so. I've been very interested in the colors that Sara has used in Montevallo, and then the lack of color in Daisie's work. I wonder if there's time, if we could talk a little bit about what an artist does in thinking when you pick up a color, pick out a color to go with. Why all those colors, and then why no color?
So Daisie and I have known each other's work for a good while. And so I think basically I am in such color right now. And then we were a little, you know, I was a little concerned, but I think that, so it made install an issue. How can we work with such strong color and then move it around, move into the gallery? So we thought about it and we spent a good bit of time thinking about how we were going to do that, and we moved things around. Daisy, you want to add something to that?
Well, can you talk, I'm kind of interested too, like the piece behind you, all the pinks and the gradations and stuff. Can you talk about kind of your use of pink throughout your work, or that kind of like a rosy color? Because it kind of pops.
So, you know, I've spent a lot of time having work that has no color. So it just so happens that, which is weird, that when we showed this, the color goes back to the color that's behind me. Which is just, you know, how did I get here? I do not know. You know, I don't know how except these pieces have been out sort of in my life again. And maybe we are affected by color and what's around us a lot.
Yeah. For me, color kind of comes back to just that environment and the season that I'm making work in. So in springtime, you'll see green will pop up a lot in my work. And then it cycles back through. So I have kind of colors that I tend to use when I do use color. Usually when I use a color in a work, it's the only color in there, just because for me, it's such an intense experience to work with color that I don't want to try to process multiple ones in the time. So it might be, you know, different greens existing the same thing, or different reds or pinks, but they tend to be kind of monochromatic in general. But for these works, you know, they are new. They were made mostly in the winter. So there is an intentional kind of absence of color, in that for me, I really focus on the action in that way. Because it's not referencing the outside world, it's referencing kind of the inside world for me. So.
And with some of this that is way back there of the work, I am really dealing with the color shifts of color. And I think with some of this current, particularly the sculpted one, in the reds and yellows, I was dealing with manipulating color. I did not put very much besides the red and the yellows and a little bit of other colors in there to manipulate with. That sort of stayed as one unit together. But I think it is a good comment about, you know, how we manage with such strong contrast.
That's great. Well, thanks everybody. I really enjoyed it.
I did too. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you both. It's a really beautiful show. It's been really rewarding experience and great conversation.
Thank you.
Goodbye.